Hello, welcome to the Ghost of Harrenhal. My name's Simon.
And I'm McKelly.
Thank you for joining us for episode 54 of our chapter-by-chapter book review of A Song of Ice and Fire by George Martin. Today we'll be discussing chapter 53 of A Game of Thrones. That's Bran 6.
As always, we're going to chat about the chapter and try not to spoil any future plot points for you. And hopefully we'll provide you with some entertainment along the way.
We'll summarise what's happened, discuss our thoughts on it, provide some useful background, compare it to the television show, indulge in a little pedantry, and cover some reader mail. Be sure to check out the show notes. They've got some additional information which will be very useful, particularly if you're not reading along with us. How are you?
I'm doing all right. How about you?
Oh, not too bad, not too bad. We're still coming to terms with having a new dog.
Yeah. How's little Penny doing?
She's doing well. Our Penny's doing well. How's your Penny?
Same as always.
Yeah.
Very cute.
A holy terror.
Her mood fluctuates between wanting you to rub her belly and snarling at you when you do it. So, you know.
Well, ours is... there's not much wrong with her. I mean, she's basically stopped peeing on the floor now. So
okay, there you go.
Yeah. Now, that just leaves the cuteness and the adorability. So
all right. Yeah.
Pretty happy with this dog.
Win-win. Yeah, I came down this morning because Molly, she's doing school virtually, and she wanted to use the microphone that I use for this, for her theater class, which is a virtual theater class, but whatever. And I came down here to get the mic, and Penny had been down here at some point because there was like 4 fresh turds right here on the floor of this room.
Nice. So. That's all we ever talk about.
It is.
Didn't we talk about this just last week?
So she doesn't have just the cuteness and adorability. That she has a little more baggage that comes along with it.
Well, I'm somewhat in mourning because the Carolina Hurricanes fell out of the Stanley Cup playoffs today.
Ah, yes. Right.
Pretty rough. But I don't begrudge Boston, but I just hope that they don't win the Stanley Cup.
Well, they made it around further than the Pens did, so, there's that.
Yeah.
I have been on a roll with good movies lately.
Well, go do tell.
I've watched 3 that I really enjoyed. Peanut Butter Falcon, have you watched that? Never
even heard of it.
Oh, it's fantastic. I think it's an Amazon original. It stars Shia LaBeouf, and the main character is a man with Down syndrome, and he sneaks out of the home that he's in and meets up with Shia LaBeouf randomly, and they kind of... And it also has Don Johnson's daughter, Dakota Johnson, maybe? Something? I don't know. Don Johnson's daughter. She's good in it, too. Anyway, it's really good.
Oh, interesting. I was going to say Dakota, but I don't know how the heck I would know that.
I feel like maybe 50-50 chance that we're right.
Well, I mean, come on. If we both thought of it, it must be right.
Right, it must be right. Anyway, it's really good. I
good.
highly recommend it. And we watched. I kind of talked Stacey into watching this one because she's usually not into cartoonish type movies, but Alita: Battle Angel, I thought it was really good too.
Does she have big eyes?
Yes, she does.
Yes.
She's like the only, there's some characters that clearly are CGI, but I think she's like the only fully cartoonish type character in the whole movie. And it was quite good. I wanted to watch it, and I was surprised how good it was. So, and then just Sunday we watched the Richard Jewell movie. About security guard.
About the Atlanta bombing, yeah.
Yes, and that was really good too, so I just on a roll here.
I heard the guy who played Richard Jewell on Mark Maron's podcast.
Okay, yeah.
And he sounded like a very interesting chap. And he said he was interesting about Richard Jewell as well.
Okay, yeah, I was just telling Stacey, I think it was tonight, that I liked that character. I liked him. He played in Black Klansman as well. And I liked him in that also. Which I believe you watched here in this room that I'm sitting in. Did you not? Didn't you watch it in my house?
Maybe. I have a story about the Black Klansman, yeah. Carson went to see a special showing of it here in Raleigh. And she actually met the police officer whose story it was.
I think you told that story while you were sitting in this room here, watching it at my house.
Makes a certain amount of sense. I would hardly hold back on that one on that day.
Right. It's not the right time for that story.
We're watching Mrs. America with, I'm no good at actors either, the Australian Kate Blanchett.
Huh, yeah. I didn't know that's a movie or is it a TV show?
That's a show on Netflix, I think, and it's about the ratification of the Equal Rights Amendment and how there were sort of various groups of women fighting for ratification and against it as well.
It's called Miss America?
Mrs. America, yeah.
Okay. Did you know that my older sister was Mrs. Pennsylvania 2000?
I did know that, actually. And
that's right.
That
I'm sure you would have. I'm sure that has come up at some point.
All right, we should get on this show on the road. Do we have copious notes today? We have quite a few, don't we?
It was a longish chapter.
It is a longish chapter, surprisingly long. Once it got going, I thought it was going to be a quick one, but then it just kept going.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's get down to business with a quick recap of what Bran was up to last time we saw him. It's been a while since we've seen Bran. If you'll recall, last time we saw him, he was having his first ride outside of Winterfell with Robb and Theon. It didn't end very well when they were attacked by the wildlings and the Night's Watch deserters. Although, thanks to a scarily well-aimed arrow from Theon, Bran came through unscathed, and they captured the wildling woman Osha. So that's how that last one ended. McKelly, why don't we give them the summary?
I believe we can do that. So Bran's sitting in a Maester Luwin-designed carrying basket on Hodor's shoulders and using Luwin's telescope to get a great view of the arrival of the Karstarks at Winterfell. Lord Rickard, accompanied by his sons Harrion, Eddard, and Torrin, lead 300 mounted and 2,000 foot soldiers. Despite their common ancestry, they look wild and different to Bran. But this is as close as he'll get, as Robb has forbidden him to ride outside Winterfell after the debacle that you just referenced in the Wolfswood.
Luwin reckons they've now gathered 12,000 men. They need to go soon. Fighting has already begun in the Riverlands, and the host will plague of locusts Winterfell if they don't move soon. Bran asks Hodor to take him to the Godswood. Bran whistles for Summer to join him, and some of the Karstark men who had been laughing at the sight of Bran on Hodor's back now have their hands full steadying their horses.
Yeah, he got a little payback there.
Yeah.
At the pool by the heart tree, Bran sends Hodor away to soak in the hot pools. Bran strokes Summer and both feel content. Bran prays for his family. He doesn't want Robb to leave, but knows that it has to happen. He prays for Rickon to understand. The little guy has taken the news that Robb is leaving very badly, and he and Shaggy Dog have gone so feral that the wolf has had to be chained up, further distressing Rickon.
Luwin has counselled Robb to delegate the fighting, but Robb won't hear of it. He's been tested, challenged, insulted, courted by the Northern Lords, and developing the skills to handle it all. He's still only 15, remember. Most dangerous of these was Lord the Great John Umber, who's bigger than Hodor. He'd bared steel at Robb, refusing to bend to Umber's demands, but at a word from Robb, Grey Wind had knocked the Great John down and bitten off 2 of his fingers. Robb diffused the situation, and the Great John has become his closest ally.
But later that night, Robb confided to Bran that he had been terrified, but that he was even more scared of Lord Roose Bolton, who silently watches all. Both boys miss their father, and gossip from King's Landing has just made matters worse. When the Raven from Sansa arrives, dispelling the gossip, but making the situation all the more dire, the die is cast and Robb calls the banners to war. Bran can't help but think that this could spell the end for Ned.
Osha disturbs Bran in the Godswood. She tells him that the wind rustling the leaves is the gods' answer to his prayers. They say that they can't help. They have no eyes in the south. Hodor, attracted by the voices, wanders over stark naked. Osha reckons he must have giant's blood. She confirms that giants are very real north of the wall. Her own brother killed a small one, 10 foot tall. She gives him more reasons to fear as she describes White Walkers and explains that that's why she was here.
She tells Bran that Robb won't listen. The true danger is in the north. Bran is captivated and assures her that he can make Robb listen. But that night Robb dines with the lords while Bran hosts the heirs and knights, and he overhears cruel words about his condition and talks to Lewin, who suggests that he become a maester. Bran wants more. He wants magic and to learn to fly like the crow in his dream promised.
Bran tells Lewin what Osha told him, but Lewin dismisses her stories and tells Bran not to burden Robb. The Lannisters have Ned Stark, not the Children of the Forest. 2 days later, Bran waves Robb off. Rickon won't leave his room. Robb charges Bran to be Lord of Winterfell in his absence. Bran hears the cheers of the men as they leave and surveys the deserted castle with sadness and fear he sees echoed in Hodor's eyes.
So, right off the bat, the very first thing we get is the Karstarks coming in, and you can see the strong family connections between the Starks and the Karstarks by their names alone. We got Rickard Karstark, who shares the same name as Bran's grandfather, Rickard Stark. Yeah. We got Eddard Karstark, obviously same name as his father, Eddard. And then we've got Torrhen Karstark. And Torrhen Stark, also known as the King Who Knelt, was the Stark king that knelt to Aegon the Conqueror after the Field of Fire when he was marching his troops down to do battle and realized, this might be a better idea to take a knee here instead.
Yeah. It's interesting thought whether or not he would be honoured. Obviously he made the right decision for himself. You've got a choice: be toasted by the dragons or bend the knee. You bend the knee in that case. But 300 years later, are you thinking, we used to be kings? If it wasn't for that Torrhen,
I almost did a background on Torrhen because this chapter, unlike most lately, was like a boon of background information options. Yeah. But I decided to save it for another day. But there is some talk about how the North felt about him taking the knee there. But yeah, you're right. His other option was to be burned alive like the folks in the Field of Fire.
Right. So. Yeah. But the sort of concept of nominative determinism, that your name sort of like guides you to what you become. Right? So Torrhen was named after someone who thought carefully and did the cowardly thing.
Right.
So is Torrhen Karstark inevitably, therefore, going to be the thinker of his family and a little bit less brave?
We'll have to keep an eye on that.
Just because he's been named after that guy. Mm-hmm. It's like there was a soccer player in England called Carlos Tevez, and he had his driver's license revoked for drink driving. And his name was Carlos, you see. It was always going to happen, you see.
Yep.
So Bran thinks back to the time in the Wolfswood when Osha and her crew attacked them, and he regrets how scared he was. He was saying that Rickon would have been more useful in the fight than he was. He was basically just dragged from his saddle and held hostage and could do nothing whatsoever.
Yeah.
And so he sort of beats himself up over that.
Yeah. If he had Summer, he would have had some teeth that he could have sunk into those folks, but he didn't have Summer.
Was Summer not there?
Summer and Greywind had gone.
They were off hunting, right?
Hunting, and Robb went to go get them.
Right. Yeah. So he thinks that Rickon at least would have kicked them, and he could have set Shaggy Dog on them, and that is true. Shaggy Dog is more likely to attack them than Summer, because, for instance, Summer would wait to be told to attack them, or to recognise danger. Shaggy Dog would just bite them anyway, friend or foe.
That's why he's chained up these days, I guess.
Yeah.
Can't contain himself. Yeah, so Bran is, he's feeling ashamed and that he can't protect himself, and he's thinking back to just a year ago when he would have climbed the walls to go see all the action going on in the winter town. And, he was able to run up and down the stairs and get on and off his pony. And he thinks about how he was able to wield a sword well enough to knock Prince Tommen in the dirt. So
yeah, that's Prince Tommen, really. He probably still could, frankly.
He might have tripped over his own feet. We don't know for sure.
But, and we get a sense of what Bran's life in the North will be like, because basically the Karstarks, as they ride in, they're staring at him. They think he's a freak,
Yeah.
And as the chapter goes on, he gets more and more of this, and it'd be hurtful to anyone, but especially to a young kid.
Right. Yeah. But he does get a little payback with Summer when he calls Summer, whistles for Summer to him, and as the wolf comes loping over, all the horses of all the Karstark men start going crazy, and they stop laughing and are now preoccupied by trying not to fall off their horses. But we get some cool sigils mentioned here in.
This whole chapter we get the whole of the North basically descending, so we get to hear about all these other families.
Yeah. Sometimes I find Bran's chapters to be maybe a little on the snoozy side, but I kind of really like this one because you did get the feel of like what the North is about. You got to hear all these northern houses and the castles bursting and the towns bursting.
This might be the last time, though, because if you think about it, all the interesting people just left.
That's true.
It's him and Hodor from here on out.
And Rickon.
Yeah, true.
So we get the mailed fist of House Glover. We get the black bear of House Mormont. We get the, as Bran puts it, hideous flayed man of House Bolton.
I don't think you need to add, as Bran puts it. It's pretty hideous to have a flayed man as your sigil. Yeah.
We get the bull moose of the Hornwoods, the battle axe of the Serwins, 3 sentinel trees of the Tallhearts, and the roaring giant in shattered chains of the Umbers.
Wow, sweet.
Yeah.
Sweet, I like that. I like all those. You know what's very strange? You know my pack of socks?
Yeah.
They have the House Hornwood bull moose for no reason that I can think of.
See, you got the extended pack. I only got the 12. I just got the standard houses.
I mean, but I mean, should the Hornwoods have been in the top 15? It feels like you'd need at least 400 pairs of socks to reach House Hornwood.
Did it have Umber? Do you have Umber socks?
No, none of those. None of the others on that list.
Just the bull moose of the Hornwoods.
Just the bull. I think probably the guy who was making the socks just really liked doing the moose because it was kind of an easy one to draw.
Yeah, so that's a good point.
I got the Hornwoods for that reason.
Hornwoods got there because of convenience.
Yeah. So we've mentioned before that Winterfell has this winter town which is empty during the summer, where people from surrounding areas fill it up during the winter because we've got the hot springs that keep Winterfell relatively warm, and they have grain storage and what have you, so that food is more plentiful at Winterfell than other places. So that's being used for all of these people that are coming in, and of course 12,000 is a lot more than even Robert brought from King's Landing, so it's the busiest Bran's ever seen, Winterfell.
Yeah, it's very, I almost said stark contrast. It's a very different feel than the last time that this group came through on their way to the Wolfwood. Bran and Robb and Theon and those guys. It was basically barren at that point. So it's done a 180 pretty quick here.
Yeah.
But Bran asks Lewin how many knights are in the group of soldiers, and Lewin explains that there's not that many knights because in the north they still primarily worship the old gods, and it's the new gods that are associated with knighthood. When you become a knight, you're anointed with the 7 oils, and you have a vigil and a sept, and you have to say these words, your vows that involve the new god. So there's not all that many. He figures of the 12,000 soldiers that have arrived at Winterfell, about 300 to 400 of them are actually knights.
Or the equivalent of knights. Oh, no, actually knights.
Yeah, then he says there's about 3,000 more that are as strong as knights.
Right. That if they weren't from the north, they would be knights, sort of thing.
Right, exactly. Yeah. But you remember, speaking of the oils and knighthood, if you remember back to Sansa 2, I guess, whenever she and the Hound were walking back from that feast together, he was escorting her back, and he kind of mentions about how he got his face burned by his brother, and that he received ointment for his burns that his brother caused on his face, and he said, "Oh, my brother received ointments too 4 years later when Prince Rhaegar knighted him Sir Gregor."
Yeah, I know that's not why you're mentioning that. You're mentioning that because you're connecting that to the use of oils in the sort of the new gods' knighting of knights.
Right.
But I don't think I realised, or I don't remember, that Rhaegar was the one who knighted Sir Gregor. But
yeah,
Sir Gregor then paid him back by murdering his children.
Wow. I had not thought of that association.
Yeah.
That's Gregor. I mean, I think that's kind of the Hound's point is, yeah, you have to say all these fancy words that you're going to uphold, the peace and be honorable and always do the honorable thing. And look at this guy that they knighted here. He's a maniac.
Right, but he should have brought in that third thing. He should have said, my brother Gregor burned my face, murdered those children, and in between it, he got made a knight. Yeah. That's how awesome he is,
Uh-huh. Yeah. Would have really driven that point home for Sansa.
Yeah. So Lewin says that the fighting started in the Riverlands. We're not sure if that just means the raiding parties that we already know about that Gregor Clegane was in charge of, or if sort of open hostilities have actually begun between the Lannister forces and the Tullys. Either would fit the bill, so we can only speculate what that was.
The only thing about the raiding was that it was kind of a while ago now. So you would tend to lean toward thinking that there has been new fighting since then, based on his wording of fighting has started and your brother has a long way to go to get to Riverrun.
But of course, when we talked about that, we did speculate that the Lannisters were trying to draw the Tullys into open war. So if the Tullys are resisting that, the Lannisters might still just be raiding, to try and goad the Tullys still.
Yeah.
Imagine that.
I just had a thought. He could also be referring to whatever Beric Dondarrion is getting up to, trying to track the mountain down. There might be skirmishes involving that.
Trying to capture him, yeah. But that presupposes that Gregor's still in the Riverlands causing mayhem,
Yeah.
You'd think if he was back west of the front in the Lannister lands, Beric Dondarrion hasn't got anywhere near him yet.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Yeah. So Bran heads to the Godswood. We know the Godswood is peaceful, and Bran likes the solitude there in the sea of the chaos of the rest of the castle. Sort of echoing the Godswood in King's Landing in this particular instance. I think, as you said, Winterfell isn't usually such a bustling place.
Right.
And so the Godswood, whilst a tranquil place, isn't an oasis of tranquility. It's just another tranquil place in Winterfell, but here it really is.
Right.
As King's Landing's Godswood was for Ned when he met with Cersei.
Yeah. It's a good comparison there. Yeah, so Bran mentions that he's learned to embrace the heart tree. If you may not remember this, but back in Bran 2, the line was, the heart tree had always frightened him. Trees ought not have eyes, Bran thought, or leaves that look like hands. So he's learned to embrace them recently, the heart tree.
And although you wrote these notes, I think exactly the same thing. He has been through so much that the fears of a child of a tree with a face are just like pale shadows to what he's actually experienced now,
Yeah, exactly.
Having come through his fall and the loss of his family,
Yeah, the continuous exodus of family members.
Right. Yeah, and particularly if you think about it, his parents, both of them left while he was still unconscious, right?
Yeah, they did.
So he didn't even get a chance to say goodbye to them.
Yeah.
The last time he saw them was the morning he climbed the tower.
Yep, and his sisters also left before he got to say goodbye. So, he was supposed to go with them. So, yeah, right. I mean, all the stuff that's gone on in the past 8 months or so. What's a face on a tree to someone who's suffered through all of this? But he's actually learned to take comfort in the heart tree's eyes. He feels like the old gods are looking over him through them, and it makes him feel pretty safe, actually.
Yeah, I mean, that's a mature thing to say and to think. I just wonder if he looks down at his legs and thinks, you could be doing a better job, you old gods, you.
It's true. He was in the Godswood when he started climbing the tower in the first place. So.
That's right.
Yeah.
Yeah. So he thinks he thinks the silence helps him to think, and he's been thinking and dreaming and talking with the gods a lot lately. So his prayer is that he wants Robb to stay or go and come back with the rest of his family, which that would be okay. If he has to go, if he brings back the rest of the family, that's a good outcome.
Right.
Rickon to understand. Rickon's causing a real problem because Rickon is in the same boat as Bran. His family keep leaving one by one and they don't come back.
Yeah.
And it's even more difficult for Rickon to process, so he's taking this news very badly.
Yeah, and everyone keeps raising Rickon down to the next person in line. Went from Cat to Robb, and now Robb to Bran, and Bran's like, that song where like the mouse, like the cheese.
Give your mouse a cookie.
Yeah, the one where things keep getting passed down, and at the end there's like just a mouse left holding the cheese or something like that. It's like he's all that's left. There's he can't pass Rickon down to anyone else.
When Bran leaves Winterfell, he's going to say, Rickon, you're in charge of raising Rickon, and Rickon will be like, already been doing that.
Yeah, it's true. Actually, Shaggy's the one probably been doing most of the raising lately. In fact, he says he's talking about how Rickon's how poorly he's handling this, and it says that he's wild as a winter storm, and that he punched old Nan when she tried to sing him to sleep, and he disappeared down into the crypts, and when they searched and finally found him, he was wielding a sword, an old sword, trying to fight his way free, and that Shaggy Dog came and bit some of the party. And the line is, the wolf was nearly as wild as Rickon. And I thought, if you're on the far side of a wild animal, as far as wild goes,
you're
pretty wild.
But Robb, one of Robb's parting lines in this is that that Rickon needs to grow up. He's a Stark and near 4. like that should be.
I saw that line you put in the notes.
No excuse for this behaviour.
He's almost 4.
So Lewin counselled Robb to stay in Winterfell, to send the armies without himself. Bran wants that too.
Yeah, but Bran begged and Lewin counselled, and neither were successful.
Yeah, I think Robb's right in many ways, though. I mean, I think as Lord of Winterfell, he needs to exert his authority, and like his father always taught him, the person issuing the command ought to carry it out.
Yeah.
Don't send 12,000 men into war if you're not willing to go with them.
Yeah, exactly. And that's basically what Robb says. Father wouldn't send men to die while sitting in Winterfell like a craven.
Yeah.
But then Bran thinks that Robb has become half a stranger to him now that he's become basically he's transformed himself into a true lord despite being only 15. And that got me curious about the last time there was an exodus of Starks out of Winterfell. So I looked it up, and Ned was about 19 when his older brother Brandon, and his father Rickard died when they went south to King's Landing. It was in 282 AC. And then when Ned left to fight in Robert's Rebellion, he left Benjen as the Stark in Winterfell. And Benjen was at most 15 at the time.
Right.
So that's the same age as Robb. And Benjen was also the last Stark left at home at the time, but he was at least 15. Bran is, as best we can tell, 8.
But Bran is not the last Stark.
That's true. There is one more to go.
Yeah. So the various bannermen test Robb. I mean, I think this is a sign of the northernness of these guys, because I think like the Lannisters would not stand for this. It's not that the Starks are easygoing. It's that they expect to be tested by their bannermen.
Yeah.
And so
there's a certain wildness to them.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Bolton and Glover both demand command of the battle. Mage Mormont, who's in charge of House Mormont, she says that her lord Robb Stark could be her grandson. And has no business giving her commands.
But she does have a granddaughter that she would be willing to let him marry. So,
yeah.
And Lord Serwyn even brought his 30-year-old daughter to Winterfell with him, and apparently she's shy and never looks up from her plate. And they never mention these two characters' names. So, the Lord Serwyn is Medger, Medger. And she is Jonelle, Jonelle.
Oh, so it's Lord Medger Serwyn.
Yes, and Janelle Serwyn.
I see. And then Lord Horwood, he brings gifts. He brings a horse, some venison, a fancy hunting horse, socks. No, I'm adding the socks. But he expects nothing in return, well, apart from a bunch of favors.
Right. Yeah. I want nothing in return except for a keep that was taken from my grandfather and the right to damn the white knife. And his name, they refer to him as Lord Horwyn. He is Hollis, Halys, Hollis Hornwood.
So all of this is just sort of like annoying and sort of stressful for Robb, probably. But the standoff with Great John Umber, is a different thing altogether, because basically
slightly
at the
different
end of
level.
Right. So what's his demand again? What's Umber's demand?
He says that if he is placed behind the Hornwoods and the Serwins in the March of Order, he's gonna take his forces and go back to Last Hearth. And Robb says, "Oh, that's fine, but after we're done with the Lannisters, we're gonna come back to Last Hearth and hang you as an Oathbreaker." Last Hearth is their keep. We're going to hang you as an Oathbreaker. And the Great John gets very upset by this and says that Robb is so young, he must piss grass. And Hollis Mullen goes to, calm the Great John down, and he shoves him to the ground like he's, I think as Robb says later, like he's Rickon or something like that. And
so fierce and wild.
Yeah. And he pulls out the largest, ugliest greatsword that Bran has ever seen.
Right. And Robb makes the point, bearing your steel to your lord is a death sentence.
Yes. He does that after he...
Yes.
First he whispers a word in Grey Wind's ear, and next thing you know, old Great John's on his back with only 8 fingers. And that's when Robb says, "My lord father taught me that it was death to bear steel against your liege lord, but doubtless you only meant to cut my meat."
And somehow Great John Umber, who's a tougher cookie than I am, laughs and says, "Well, your meat is awfully tough."
Yeah, that's what I meant by there's a wildness to these guys,
Oh, yeah.
That's not how most people in a civilized world would react to such things.
Right. An ow, a sucking on the stump. Sort of.
Right.
So Bran recounts that that night, Robb comes to his room and they talk about the events. And Robb admits that he was as terrified as any 15-year-old would be if a 7-foot man who knows how to use a sword came at you. So.
Right. Yeah. They describe him as tall as Hodor and twice as wide.
Yeah.
So I guess it explains their sigil of the giant in Shattered
Breaking
Chains.
the chains. Yeah. But Robb also says that he's even more afraid of Roose Bolton. That he's heard rumours that in the Dreadfort they have a room where they keep the flayed skin of the people that they've flayed the skin from as trophies. Yeah. So they hope that that's just an old Nan story, but it does play into their sigil, which is indeed a flayed man.
Yeah, we actually talked about that. It was just the last Arya chapter when we were talking about Meryn Trant and their sigil being a hanged man, and I said it was morbid, and you said not as morbid as House Bolton's sigil. This is their sigil, a flayed man on their shields. So, and then,
it does make you wonder what they're trying to say,
Yeah, I guess don't mess with us, or we'll
don't mess with us.
Skin.
Yeah, I mean, it just seems like you're really sort of trying to rule by fear there. There's no sort of
no subtlety at all.
A set of scales, for instance, would show sort of judgment, wisdom, balance. It's none of that.
No. And so Bran's response to that to Robb is, "That's just one of old Nan's stories, right?" It is, right? So the kids, one thing that the boys agree on is they both wish that their father was there. And don't we all wish that Ned was there? There's rumors, but they don't know where. They don't know. They didn't for a long time know what was going on with their father. They were getting all kinds of crazy rumors, ranging from that he himself had killed King Robert to one really outlandish one that Prince Rhaegar had returned from the dead and was amassing an army of ancient heroes on Dragonstone.
That one does lack credibility.
It does a little.
But then all of these rumours are put to bed by the arrival of a letter from Sansa from King's Landing, which basically we knew what it was going to say. Catelyn and Robb Stark are to present themselves in King's Landing, bend the knee, swear fealty to King Joffrey, and if they do that, there's a chance that Ned can be released from his prison.
Yeah, you're right, and like you say here, I think you put these in the notes. It is very parallel to Lord Rickard and Uncle Brandon, who were summoned to King's Landing as well.
And never came back, yes.
That's right.
That's
they never came
scary
back.
Part of that. Yeah. But also, for more recently for Bran, in Bran's mind, it has a parallel to Ned himself. Ned went to King's Landing and now he's not come back. And now, his not coming back because he's doing a job is one thing. His not coming back because he's been imprisoned as a traitor is quite another.
Yes, it is. But Robb was as frustrated as we were that Sansa doesn't mention Arya at all in her letter. And I was thinking that, maybe while writing a letter to her brother, she might have been reminded that she had a sister. But, Joff loves her, so I guess that's clouding her judgment.
I think, actually, I listened to the Sansa episode the other day, and I think you called Sansa Cersei at least twice uncorrected.
I did, yes. Yeah. I caught it too. There was nothing I could do about it by the time.
No, it's fine. It didn't matter, but it was weird. Weird we didn't catch it at the time.
I know.
Yes.
I have a tendency to do that a lot.
To munch character names, yeah, you do. And I'm useless. I'm like, oh, okay. That's what she's called.
So if I say the wrong name, just assume I meant the right name. It's the moral of that story.
So Bran thinks about the fact that Sansa has lost her wolf and worries for her for this reason. I think the boys have become very close to their wolves, and they must worry for their sisters because they both lost their wolves. Sansa's is definitely dead. They know that. Nymeria's lost, but neither girl has their wolf. Now maybe Arya can re-find Nymeria somehow, but.
Well, she's planning on heading north. Maybe she can, stop along and track her down.
Yeah.
But I was wondering about that. Imagine if the wolves had made it to King's Landing with the girls. How long before Cersei had them chained up in the kennel? She's not going to allow the girls walking around the Red Keep with their wolves in tow.
No, certainly not now. I mean,
right?
Maybe they could have. Been in the Tower of the Hand and nobody would have bothered them, but I think Lady and Nymeria were both in trouble. But it would be interesting, a different story if Lady was still around now, and if Arya had escaped King's Landing with Nymeria in tow.
Right.
Obviously, it's very obvious who she is. If you have a giant direwolf trotting along beside you.
Yes. That's true.
You look at the sketch that someone's given you of what Arya Stark looks like, and you're like, I'm not sure, but that's a direwolf.
That is not a dog. Good point. Yeah. But we get a kind of cool but very kind of sad and melancholy depiction of Lady being buried in the Winterfell lichyard. And before the men who were bringing Lady's bones had even made it to the castle, the wolves, her brothers, were already howling. And, it made Bran think that, she went south and all that came back were her bones. And that reminds him that, like we said earlier, his grandfather Rickard, his uncle Brandon, and 200 of their best men went south and never came back. Father, mother, sister, Sir Roderick, Jory, Fat Tom, Hullen, all have gone south and have not come back.
Yeah.
It's quite the ominous list.
Yeah.
And even Rickon says it at the near the end of the chapter. He says, no one ever comes back.
Yeah. Of course, for Rickon, though, I mean, this 6 months is the biggest piece of his life,
Yeah.
For the rest of us, they've only been gone 6 months. They could easily come back. There's nothing. It's not the end of the world that they're gone. They are just temporarily detained. Hopefully,
at least we know. Everyone other than his grandfather and his uncle and their 200 men. Well, Jory, Fat Tom, Holland, we know that they're not coming back. But his family and Sir Roderick could still return.
Yeah. So back in the Wolfswood, Osha gives Bran a lesson in hearing the old gods. If you remember Osha, she's the one survivor from the attack on Bran. Bran's prayer was that, and Osha overheard this, was to watch over Robb and the other lords, and Theon too, I suppose, defeat the Lannisters and bring Dad home. When he says all that, the wind rustles the leaves, and Osha says that's the wind is the god speaking. But she then says, as we mentioned in the recap, that the gods can't help in the south because all the Godswoods were cut down, so they don't have their... Sorry, the werewoods, you're right. The werewoods were cut down, so they don't have their eyes, because it's through the eyes of the werewoods that the gods can see. So south of the north, they don't have any ability to help.
They're eyeless. And I wondered if maybe that's why the Starks, aside from Ned in Robert's Rebellion, fare so badly in the south. Their gods can't keep an eye on them.
Yep. So Osha sees Hodor in all his glory, thinks that he must have giant's blood in him.
Not from his great-grandmother's side. Because if you recall, Old Nan is his great-grandmother, and she's a tiny little lady, so it's coming from somewhere else.
So Lewin says there are no more giants, and it seems a little bit odd that a maester would say that.
Yeah, I agree, because especially in the north, because Osha speaks of them like they're not that uncommon north of the wall. And if we've got rangers going north of the wall on rangings, hunting wildlings and stuff, you'd think they'd come across some giants from time to time. And that kind of news would spread. Maester Aemon would hear about it and send it back to the information back to the Citadel or something, But
that's a thought worth discussing, actually, because so you're right, the Rangers go north of the wall and they see the things that they see. So I get that Tyrion Lannister thinks there are Grumpkins and Snarks and nothing else, right?
Right.
But the Rangers see wonders north of the wall. At least giants, if nothing else. They definitely see giants.
You would think so.
And all the Rangers seem to be a little bit creeped out by the idea of White Walkers.
Yeah, whether they speak it or not, it crosses their mind from time to time.
Detect it, yeah. So they've seen things. Now, maybe the problem is, when you were talking about this, I was going to say, right, but there's no communication between the wildlings north of the wall and Maester Luwin. But you're right, there is that connection, which is the Rangers. The Rangers of the Night's Watch live both north of the wall and communicate with people south of the wall.
Yeah.
But maybe the answer here is that the news gets to the lords. Like Ned Stark hears from Benjen Starks the things that he sees north of the wall. And as a result, Ned Stark doesn't circulate the news, doesn't say, oh my god, the Grumpkins and Snarks are real. Instead, he makes a point of trying to populate the wall with worthy men.
Oh, I see. Yeah.
Because he doesn't want to appear stupid and a bumpkin to other lords. But he knows the truth.
Yeah. I was just thinking Maester Aemon is still a maester, and he's probably got some sort of Raven connection to the Citadel. And he could let them know, hey, our rangers are legitimately reporting still seeing giants north of the wall.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, you'd think you'd see one of those. The other things might lie low, but giants are big.
Hard to lie low when you're 13 feet tall.
Yeah. So, Osha says that they're real, that her own brother killed one.
But she also says there's things worse than giants north of the wall, and that men leave home and come back as whites. And that's why she fled with Stiv and the rest of that gang.
Yeah. Yeah, and she talks about how hard her life was north of the wall, but nothing about her hard life drove her south of the wall until the dead started coming back with blue eyes.
Yeah.
And sinister intentions.
And what's something I've an interest... Well, we're allowed to say interesting, so I'm going to say it. An interesting connection between this conversation and a conversation she had in the last Bran chapter is that right now, she seems awfully sure that the place you don't want to be is north of the wall. There's whites, there's giants, there's White Walkers. But in the Wolfswood, it was her that wanted to take Bran back as a hostage for Mance Rayder. And it was Stiv that said, "You want to go back? You think White Walkers care you have a hostage?"
Very good.
So
that should be in pedantry. Because you're right.
Do you know, when I remembered the conversation, but in my mind, before I went back to look it up, I thought it was the other way around. I thought it was Stiv that wanted to go back.
If it had been the other way around, it would have been very self-consistent. But because it was the way around it was, that's pedantry right there.
Yeah, I guess so.
Mm-hmm. So Osha tells Bran that Robb should be marching north. That's where the danger is. The existential threat. Yeah, big deal. Your father's been captured. You're all going to die unless you go north and fight.
Yeah, it's just not going to happen. Like,
no.
I mean, even if Jon had gotten him a letter, because now we know Jon has legitimately battled a White. Even if Jon had gotten him a letter that said, "It's all real, we need your help," Robb's already committed south of the Neck. His father is being held prisoner. And
how do you tell those 12,000 men, we're not actually going to go and rescue your liege lord, we're actually going to go and fight those Grumpkins and Starks? Come on with me!
Yeah, I mean, regardless of whether he's going south to kneel or to fight, he's got to go south.
Yeah. And I mean, the wall was built huge for a reason.
Yes.
It was to keep these monsters out,
Exactly.
So maybe we can rely on that.
Yeah, it's a big wall. So
yeah.
But if the others did manage to make it past the wall, as depleted as the North is right now of troops, that could be a really bad thing.
Yeah. So I mentioned that Theon got a mention in Bran's prayer. Osha refers to him as that smiling boy Greyjoy. And so both of them have not much respect for Theon, it seems. So Bran eats dinner with the Karstark sons that evening, and they say that he must be broken on the inside as well as the outside if he's not willing to kill himself for the state he finds himself in. They don't say that to him directly, but they say it where he can hear it.
Yeah.
Which is pretty cruel on a 9-year-old.
And that goes back to your thing you said at the very beginning of this section. You said that maybe Torrhen Karstark would be the thinker of the group, but he was one of the two in this conversation.
Oh, right. Okay.
It is unfortunately Eddard and Torrhen, both named after Starks, one of which being his father. And they're saying this really just harsh stuff.
Yeah. So Luwin suggests that Bran could become a maester, but Bran tells Luwin he wants to learn more than what they can teach you at the Citadel. He wants to learn magic. The crow in his dreams has told him that he will be able to fly.
Yeah, if you recall, that was, I think, Bran 3. He dreamt, he was falling and falling and falling, and the crow kept telling him he could fly. That's what he's referring to.
Bran tells Luwin what Osha's told him, but Luwin, trying to be the adult, he says, "Look, you can't burden your brother with this nonsense.
Right? Yeah.
He's got enough on his plate now. He doesn't need this. He's got to go and do what he's got to do."
Yeah.
And so the message never gets to Robb. It wouldn't have got there anyway. Osha said earlier that she tried to tell Robb directly, but he just walked past her, didn't even see her, because she's just a slave now in many ways.
Basically, she's the one thing I don't think we mentioned. Maybe you mentioned it in the summary, but she's got shackles on her ankles, right? So, but so then the chapter ends with Robb and all of his men departing, and he tells Bran, "You are the Lord of Winterfell now," and Bran's watching them all leave, and there's cheers going up through the winter town as they're riding out, and Bran's thinking he'll never hear cheers for himself like that, and that Hollis Mullen is carrying the banner of House Stark with him. And I realized, but he's the current captain of the guard of Winterfell. He followed Jury after Jury went with Ned and then died. So now Bran will need to appoint a third new captain of the guard in like half a year. And it's basically him and Hodor left in this.
Yeah, bucket on the head for Hodor. He's the captain of the guard.
He might have left him at least a skeleton crew, I mean, come on.
So as they leave, Bran notices that all that's left in Winterfell are women, children, and old men. And that does leave the seat of power of Winterfell, of the North, somewhat sparsely defended.
Yeah, that's it. But then the chapter ends with Bran and Hodor agreeing on one thing. Hodor.
Hodor?
Yes.
Hodor, yeah.
Unfortunately, Bran doesn't know what it means, but he agrees with him when he says it.
So the background, Mage Mormont gets a mention. So she is the younger sister of Lord Commander Geo Mormont of the Night's Watch. So she's aunt to Jorah Mormont, advisor to Daenerys Targaryen.
Right.
She certainly didn't expect to rule Bear Island anytime. You know, her brother was the Lord and he had a son, but her brother got the calling for the Night's Watch, and then her son crossed Ned Stark. She is known as the She-Bear. She has 5 daughters, but no known husband, and rumours abound that she mates with actual bears. So it looks like Bear Island will have female lords for quite a while. You know,
I guess so.
It's a female lord now, and she has 5 daughters.
So, like I said earlier, there was like a ton of background options in this chapter, but I kind of wanted to spread them out a little bit. So I want to talk a little bit about knighthood. Maester Luwin mentions that due to the prevailing religious belief in the north, of the worship of the old gods, the knights are not as prevalent in that region of Westeros as they are in the other 6 kingdoms. So let's take a closer look at knights in general, shall we? A knight falls between lords and small folk in terms of social standing. And knighthood is also not hereditary, unlike many of the other titles in the 7 kingdoms. The concept of knighthood likely derives from the Andals, as, like I said, is rooted in the faith of the 7, which was brought to Westeros during the Andal invasion. And this brings us back to the lack of knights in the north, as the north has stronger First Men roots than that of the other kingdoms. Now, the north is not alone in it not completely embracing knighthood. The Iron Islands also don't generate a great deal of knights, as they too do not traditionally worship the 7. So how does one become a knight? First off, any man can be knighted. Also, any knight can make another knight. However, the usual path to knighthood begins with pages and squires. Most men are knighted as adults. However, in rare instances, teen boys have been knighted. Jaime Lannister and Loras Tyrell were both knighted at 15, which is extremely rare. But the youngest knight I could find was Daemon Blackfyre, who was 12 when his father Aegon IV knighted him. Of course, everything Aegon IV did was usually not very good and done for negative.
What was his nickname?
The Unworthy.
The Unworthy.
Yes. Yeah. So anything he did needs to be looked at in a certain light. To be knighted by a king, prince, knight of the King's Guard, or a legendary knight is considered a rather prestigious distinction.
Unless you're the son of the king, in which case...
Mean.
Yeah.
Come on, Dad.
Yeah. I wanted a toy car.
And instead I got a knighthood. What am I supposed to do with that? So Luwin mentions the vows that the knights take. And depending on the form of knighting, those kind of vows could differ. There's the formal vows, which haven't been completely pieced together, but it goes something like this. In the name of the warrior, I charge you to be brave. In the name of the father, I charge you to be just. In the name of the mother, I charge you to defend the young and innocent. In the name of the maid, I charge you to protect all women. That's kind of all we got. In
the name of the Boltons, I charge you to flay their skin.
Right. Yeah. I wonder how Sir Gregor got through agreeing to all that.
Huge fingers crossed behind his back.
That's right. However, the less formal vows go like this. Simon, do you swear before the eyes of God and men to defend those who could not defend themselves, to protect all women and children, to obey your captains, your liege lord, and your king, to fight bravely when needed, and do such other tasks as are laid upon you, however hard or humble or dangerous they may be?
Well, it's like this, you see. I'd like to. Don't get me wrong.
Got a really busy
I just don't want to make a promise that I might break down the line. You know?
I'm going to say yes for now.
Yeah.
Finally, there are a few different types of knights. There's a landed knight who has his own keep and lands, such as Sir Gregor, who has Clegane's keep. In some cases, landed knights can be wealthier and more powerful than lesser lords. There's hedge knights who have no keep of their own. They ride from keep to keep, taking the service of a lord wherever they can get it. And then there's a household knight who doesn't own his own keep, but is taken into service by a lord. And then there is the Knights Inquisitor, and they work for the Iron Throne and investigate and punish threats to the throne.
So I wonder if Beric Dondarrion is acting as a Knight Inquisitor at the moment.
Oh, yeah. Right.
Very good, thank you for that. Comparison with the television show, we don't see the Northern Lords arriving in Winterfell. That's captured and represented by the confrontation between the great John Umber, and Robb in the dining hall of Winterfell, which is very similar. Everything that in the book is recaptured in that scene. Robb visits Bran in his bed and tells him that he must look after Winterfell. So the parting is captured in in the bedroom scene.
Okay.
Bran wants to go with him, which I don't think Bran in the book actually suggested that at any point.
I don't believe so.
When Robb leaves the bedroom, Rickon comes in and says that just like Ned and Cat, Robb won't be coming back. So Rickon is more creepy than feral in the show, I would say. The last scene in the show of this chapter is the scene in the Godswood with Osha. So Bran never really gets a chance to pass on her message. It's too late. He never. There's no sense that he had a chance to talk to Robb.
Yeah.
The book says that Osha is looking more like a woman since she was captured and sort of cleaned up a little bit. But in the show, she looks exactly as she looked when they captured her. They haven't cleaned her up at all. Prior to these scenes in the show, there was a scene where Theon was terrorizing Osha while she was cleaning, which is obviously not in the book at all.
Yeah.
Osha, in the conversation, was outsmarting Theon at every turn. But it's beginning to turn nasty and perhaps sexual, and Lewin walks in and saves her, and he basically says, be careful around Theon, don't try not to be alone in a room with him, sort of thing.
Okay.
But Osha laughs about the kind of men she's dealt with before in her life, and she's not worried about Theon. So Lewin himself hears the information from Osha that Bran tries to tell Lewin in the book.
All right.
Osha herself says two things, Lewin says to her, the things you speak on have been gone for thousands of years, but Osha replies, they wasn't gone, old man, they was sleeping, and they ain't sleeping no more. So Lewin hears it directly, and I mean, he doesn't react, but to me those words are more chilling than a 9-year-old telling me they're afraid of what's going on. Just a passing comment here, Osha's played by the excellent Natalia Tena, who played Ellie in About a Boy, a movie we've mentioned a couple of times.
Right, yep.
And she was also Nymphadora Tonks in the Harry Potter films. I have no idea who that was.
Yeah.
I have not seen all the Harry Potter films.
You haven't? Oh. She can change her hair color and stuff a lot.
Oh, very nice. And she's also the lead singer and accordionist for a band called the Molotov Jukebox, which is really cool. That she sings and plays the accordion.
Yeah, there are other actors in the Game of Thrones who are singers, right? Isn't Bronze?
We'll get to that.
So is she shackled in the TV show? I can't remember.
Yes, at all times.
Okay.
Pedantricon, and nothing bothered me here until you told me about Osha's vault face on whether or not to flee back north of the wall.
Yeah.
Which is clearly a mistake. So now I'm totally with you. So, news and notes. It's your very last chance to enter the drawing for the Jon Snow Funko Pop. We've had a handful of entries, not that many, so you've got a chance. Just get it in. End of August 2020 to get your review to us. So, just a reminder, give us a review, take a screen capture of it, email it to ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com.
Yeah, you can't win unless you're in. So,
exactly.
Get them in. Just take a minute, and it'll be really cool.
Yeah. So let's conclude. It's worrying times for Bran. He is only 8. It's hard to imagine that he doesn't share the view of Rickon, that the family keep living in dribs and drabs and nobody ever seems to come back.
Yeah. It's, boy, they're in quite the situation now. The Lord has gone from, like, the true Lord Eddard Stark of Winterfell to 15-year-old Robb, who's he's handling it all right, to now an 8-year-old. And his successor is 3. And although he is almost 4, so...
he's 4. So he could become captain of the guard.
Right. So, But then also, is Osha right? I mean, we know she's telling the truth, but would the North marshaling to the Wall actually make any useful difference?
That's what I think. I think, yeah, big deal that she's right. Big deal that these things are north of the Wall. You've got to rely on the Wall. Those things are too terrifying to actually fight them. What would 12,000 men freezing to death at the Wall do right now?
Yeah.
Sure, if the Whites are scrambling up the Wall right now, it's time to go.
Right.
But you can't send 12,000 men to freeze waiting for that to happen.
Yeah. I mean, what are they going to do? Send them all like, just put them all north of the Wall and say, all right, go find some others.
And by so doing, you leave Winterfell just as undefended, but nobody's gone south.
Yeah.
So there's nothing between you and the
right.
forces of your enemies.
Solid point.
Is Robb right to go to war? I mean, there is an alternative here. There is that idea that you could just say, you know what? If I go to King's Landing, I can say to them, look, you've got the fealty of the North. I'll bend the knee. I'll tell you that Joffrey's the king, and you'll have a loyal servant in the North. But I've got one condition, and that is you free my brother and my sister and my father.
Yeah.
And they come home with me.
Yeah, we probably should have talked about that a little more in the general discussion because, yeah, his decision to go to war versus bending the knee is a big deal. That's, that as Bran thinks, that could cause his father to be killed in the process. So,
yeah.
And like you said,
but
Robb doesn't know what Ned knows. So he could say, listen, I don't know what my dad did. I don't know what's going on there. But I will bend the knee. I will pledge my fealty to Joff if you free my family.
And frankly, even if you did know, that's still a viable option.
Yeah.
I mean, what is a king? King is whoever people decide is the king,
Right.
Right. Yeah. So, but you know what? The more I thought about that question, the more I thought maybe Karstarks' actions to this point have made this determination. Because it's very difficult to imagine from Robb's point of view. If you're Robb, you know what Cat did to Tyrion.
Yeah.
You don't know that Tyrion's safe.
Right.
We don't know that Tyrion's safe yet. I mean, last time we saw him, there was definitely, he's still in a lot of danger.
Yeah.
If they go south together and Tyrion marches into the throne room in King's Landing and says, that's the lady who tried to kill me.
Right. Yeah. That's a good point.
It could turn very ugly very quickly.
Yeah.
So regardless of your intentions.
The Starks go down to take a knee, pledge fealty. Tyrion says, oh, no, not so easy, my friend.
Yeah.
Now it's my turn.
You can go back, Rob, but that one's staying.
Yeah. See where you're coming from.
So maybe that's it. Maybe his thinking is there's just no way we get out of that. So we've just got to go and fight them and win and fight until we get him back.
Yeah, that could be it.
Yeah. And I mean, it's not over for Ned anyway. I mean, Bran's wrong to think that Ned's dead because Ned could change his mind.
Yeah.
I mean, we know Ned's a stickler, but really, if Ned were to say, I had a fever because of my broken leg.
Right.
I was talking nonsense. I was just delusional. Of course, Joffrey's the king. The North will bend its knee to Joffrey Baratheon, first of his name.
Yeah,
and
especially now or when he finds out that Cersei has Sansa.
Right.
That might force him to change his tune. All right. Well, as always, you can reach us at ghost.harrenhall@gmail.com and follow us on Twitter @ghostharrenhall. We're on Facebook, Instagram, and YouTube.
Don't forget to leave us a review. If you do, take a screen capture and email it to us. Win that Funko Pop.
Definitely do.
Thanks for listening.
Thanks.
Bye.
Bye.